Hi, good afternoon. This is Su Ming from Su Ming Heritage. We are doing a chat with Chester Ong for behind the scenes. And today being World Photography Day and this month at Su Ming Heritage being dedicated to photographs, we thought we would ask Chester how to capture heritage even if the buildings or people may no longer exist. So let me just give a short introduction to Chester. He's a photographer who I've known since 2007, a very dear friend, and Chester is based in Hong Kong. He frequently travels to New York, China, around Asia, and Chester has more than 25 years of shooting experience, specializing in lifestyle, architecture, interiors, and food. Chester's works have appeared in publications and books worldwide. And one of my favorite books is the first edition of Chinese Houses of Southeast Asia. And this complements another award-winning project, Chinese Houses, the Architectural Heritage of a Nation. So this particular book took 3 years and 4 field trips to Asia to gather data and research, and it looks into old homes of Chinese sojourners and settlers, and it even has a section on the Sun Yat Sen Penang house. And as you know, Chester, any topic related to Sun Yat Sen is very close to our heart and what we are doing in Ipoh. And I do hope that one day we will have a Sun Yat Sen Ipoh edutainment center, and I hope that we will have you here at that point in time. But in the meantime, Chester, coming back to this question on using photography to capture heritage, even if those buildings are no longer around or the people don't exist anymore.
For me as a photographer, I've always loved architecture, but I love the history behind it. I love to imagine what happened to one place. The weddings, the banquets, the children that was born there, you know. If you look at the Peranakan photos in Singapore and Malaysia, you see a lot of wedding photos. If I go to the Philippines, interview a family, they will show me wedding photos from the 1930s, and even up to recent ones. You come to understand them. It's not about photographing a house or a building. It's photographing a story of what went on and around that building. It's not a dead building. It has a life. I have a personal hobby of documenting buildings like these. I will research, talk to the family, and then I would do very detailed photography, and then I would explain to the family, this is your heritage. It is important for us to understand where we came from. You're Malaysian Chinese, maybe you grew up in Ipoh. You want to know, what was my great-grandfather doing? Was he in the tin mines? What was his life before he came? From what village in Guangzhou or Fujian or Quanzhou or wherever that is? You want to know, what was it like? How difficult their life was and how they succeeded. You want to know the day-to-day life. Oh, there was like gang warfare between the Kongs. Oh, there was a Kapitan China, or the foreigners, you know. And what was it like during World War II? We try to understand, and you try to find every little snippet that you can find. Everything. It could be a memorial tablet. It could be a gravestone. It could be a record in City Hall or the local municipal hall.
How do you use all the data that you've discovered in the lead up to a photo shoot? How does all the information come together into your photo or onto the outcome?
It's like a massive jigsaw puzzle. When we first started this project, it's like a pile of jigsaw puzzle that you don't know where to begin. And everybody tells you this, tells you that. It's like everybody comes here with a piece of jigsaw puzzle. You got to do this. You got to do that. You got to do this. Where does this piece go? Where does that go? Where does it go? And then eventually, you started to lay each pieces together, and then you start seeing a bigger picture. But do you know that Phuket and Penang have a connection? We didn't know that. Did you know that there was an independent Chinese republic somewhere in one of the islands in Indonesia before the Dutch? We didn't know that. You gather information. Sometimes you hear rumors. One very good example was there was a research going on about a Jesuit mission in Zhuhai. So why would a Jesuit mission exist in Zhuhai in the 17th century? All we hear is rumors. And then somebody would go to the Jesuits in the Philippines and there were records, obscure records about a so-called mission in Zhuhai. So it's snippets. And a lot of these places don't exist anymore. Interestingly, when Ron and I went to, we covered Southeast Asia, and we noticed similarities, except the Philippines. We went to Vigan, which is in the Ilocos North area, northern part of Luzon. Ask any Filipino, they say, oh, it's a Spanish city. And then we met an academic in Manila. I said, no, I dispute that. It's a Chinese settlement. And a lot of Filipinos refused to accept it. And then we dug more information. We found it was actually a Chinese settlement. And that the names were actually originally Chinese that's been made Spanish sounding. And that they have assimilated, because the culture and the history of the Chinese who came to these places, they're very resilient. They will take every opportunity to go one step higher than where they are. So if it means like they have to renounce their Buddhist faith to become Catholics in order to live a better life, they'll do it. So you really had to look beyond the surface. You had to dig deep. Names, for example, Siquia in the Philippines. We always say, oh, it's a rich Spanish family. But then if you look at it carefully, it's actually a Chinese name of the great-great-great-grandfather from Fujian, whose name is Siquia. And then you come to know like the name's Di Tuason. Okay? What does it mean? It's the great-grandson of the Di family. In Hokkien, Di Tuason. You know? We discovered all these things because we actually, the information comes to us. We started looking at things. One very interesting thing that we talk about often is the roof lines of these houses. Chinese architecture has very distinctive features. We went all over Indonesia. We see it. We recognize it. Malaysia, maybe Ipoh, whatever. We see similarities. But then we went to Thailand. It's a little bit different. You went to the southern part of Thailand where it's half Muslim. You see it, but it's not exactly Chinese, but you see it. It's like the thing going on. And then we went to Cebu. And they say, oh, it's a Spanish adobe house. And then Ron and I think, yeah, it looks like it, but look at those roofs. The Spanish doesn't build like that. So a lot of it is through observation and looking at photographs of existing photos or maybe archival photos. And then you have this massive jigsaw puzzle. Thailand might have something. Burma might have something. Vietnam has something. Malaysia has something. Indonesia, Singapore. Everybody thinks they're isolated, but actually they're all interconnected. And then when Ron and I put the photos down together, we started seeing a pattern. And then say, aha, a eureka moment. And then when, simple things like bakwa, the octagon amulet with a mirror, or hu paper, the amulet, or maybe the brush, or scissors, especially in Malaysia, you see a lot. You think it's only isolated to Malacca? No. Actually, every region has a version of it. And then you started looking at the bigger picture. You get all these little bits, and then you start seeing the big picture. And that's when we're able to create a narrative, a story. So they're actually not very obvious. They might be sitting in front of you, but you don't know what it means. So you really had to really, really look carefully. And it took somebody like Ron Knapp, who is an American, to really understand it. And I myself, who's born in the Philippines, of ethnic Chinese, I had to end up asking him, Ron, what does this paper mean? Because he understood it.
Backtracking a little bit to a point that you made about people who are resilient. You know, resilience is an intangible. Is it possible to capture resilience or intangible qualities into a photograph? Is it possible to capture the pain and the aches of Chinese laborers who were indentured into Perak, for example, to work in the tin mines? How do you
Yes.
work that into a photograph? How do you set up the photograph? Do you set up the people, or do you set up the props? Do you Photoshop or do you not? Tell us.
What we do is, again, you have to talk to people. Sometimes certain objects would show up, like, for example, a memorial tablet, or you stumble into a grave. Bukit China is an example. It's like this is the biggest Chinese cemetery in the world, although I will dispute that. So you have to look at the hidden things. A very humble grave will tell you a lot of story. A very elaborate grave will tell you a lot of stories. In terms of photography, yes, we can manifest the life of those people who was, let's say, a man as a laborer laboring in a tin mine. You can do that. You just have to look at, maybe there's some records and it gives you an idea. You look at his grave, think, okay, so and so, what was his life? It is intangible, right? But sometimes you will get a glimpse of it. It's hard to explain, but also, let's say you see tools of the trade, axe, spades, wheelbarrows in a museum somewhere in Malacca. You already have an idea. That weathered handle on the wheelbarrow, the rusty axe or pick that they use. Imagine that hard, back-breaking work they're doing. And if you convey that in a photograph in a way that it's very emotional, it comes out. Even simple things like, and I know you know this very well, paper lanterns. Paper lanterns that you love, I remember that one. When I look at it, I can see what was the story behind it, what was the history, why was it there, why was it this color, why was it using this character. You can express that in photograph. And it already tells you what was the life of those Peradacans were like. Let's say if there was a Chinese New Year and they're gonna hang that lantern. You don't just go in there and take a photo of a memorial tablet and say, oh, that, move on. No. For me is I look at it, I touch it, I try to find out more from the host. What do you know about this? Ron Knapp would read whatever the inscriptions by it, and then I get the idea and I photograph it in a certain way that can be very emotional. It's all done very simply. We don't have any lighting. It's just a camera and a tripod, reflectors. That's it. Very simple, really. But as I come to understand what these objects are, I come to understand the people behind it, and intuitive. Not many photographers have that kind of gift. I believe I do. I can pick up something and I can sort of like get an idea, where did this thing come from. It's not supernatural, voodoo, crazy stuff. It's just you sense it. It's no more different than when I go to an old house and I sense what's going on. What happened here, even as recently as the 70s and the 80s and the 90s, you pick up vibes. A sensitive photographer will pick up vibes. If you are the kind of photographer who loves what you're doing, who puts your heart and soul to it, you will pick up a vibe. I go to the Sun Yat Sen Museum. I pick up some vibes in there. It's not what you call crazy, scary, woo kind of vibe. No, that's how I can answer it. It's hard to explain, but I pick up vibes. I go in the building, or I touch something, or I hear stories, and we do research, and then we come up with a photo.
So that's really very interesting. Thank you for sharing. For example, if you walk into a old Peranakan house and say you can sense this was a happy house with a happy couple, in a happy marriage, how would that knowledge transfer into the end product of a photo?
The funny thing for me is Peranakan houses always give me the impression of food. There's always something tasty going on. So one thing I notice is that I tend to photograph them bright and colorful. That's how I translate it. And oftentimes when we go to a Peranakan house or a Peranakan museum, there's always wedding photos. Weddings tend to tell you a happy event. So I translate that as positive, very happy. You go to a place where there was war, there was violence, you pick up the vibe and you depict it as such. Peranakans is a very interesting example because their aesthetics are very elaborate. It's a mix of Malay and Chinese, Western influence, and they love colors. They love those greens and pinks, and it's such a joy to photograph them. And and oftentimes when you go in there, what do they talk about? Oh, the food that they're making, the little this and that, the snacks, and Peranakans love to eat. So you find that happiness there, that innate joy, and it's infectious. You picked it up and you photographed it. Do you know that in 2000 I went to Cuba? I went to Havana, and I did a personal assignment. I found out there are Chinese living in Havana, and at that time I went there. They don't see many ethnic Chinese, and I made friends with them. And they were so excited to see a young man from Asia, from Hong Kong, who's interested in them because they were neglected. And they brought me to ancestral halls. I got to see banners, flags. I would probably call them triad flags, or maybe we'll call them association flags. And then the Quan Kong, which they normally will never show anybody. And then I go in there and I pick up this vibe that this was at one point a very vibrant Chinese community that was transplanted from a part of Guangzhou. And they were poor. They ended up there. They became very prosperous. By the end of the Batista regime, most of them left for New York, and the ones that left over, they were poor. So I photographed it, and because they were telling the story, I photographed it. It was very sad and forlorn. It was very dark. It was very emotional. The people are old. They have nothing to do. They have no value whatsoever. They're just waiting to die. But when you go to a place like, say, Chinatown in Brooklyn, everybody's busy, working, making money. You go to Singapore, it's the same. There's a hive of activity. You go to Manila, Chinatown, it's the same. And you pick up the vibe, and that's how you document it. That's how you photograph it. The movements, the action, the energy, you pick it up. But if it's dead, well, it's just dead. So a lot of it is really the impression that I pick up along the way.
I tend to think that it's a lot easier to pick up action and vibe over a video rather than a photograph, because you can capture a whole moving scene.
I would disagree with that. The problem also because the video is not. It depends on the cameraman and how sensitive he is. Sometimes the cameraman is hungry. He just goes in there, just want to pan the camera and move on. And also because remember, a video is at least 24 frames per second. It goes really fast. A photograph is a still moment in time that you can actually linger for as long as you want. I take a photograph. One of the most memorable photos I had of the Sun Yat Sen Museum was the kitchen. I remember it. I can see it. And then the sitting area with the ancestral hall. I remember that. It's like a layer. And when I go to the kitchen, I see it. It's a huge kitchen. A lot of utensils. So what does this tell you? this is a very busy place. There's a lot of social events going on, maybe up until recently. So it's like a hive or the heart of the community at some point. And if you're doing research on the Sun Yat Sen Trail, you come to realize that at a particular time when Sun Yat Sen was in that part of Malaysia, there was so much going on. There were people coming to see him. There were things being planned or even plotted. So much is going on. It lingers in the air. You picked it up. And with the way that things are laid, like, why would you have a very big walk in there? This is not a household. This is a community place.
Trying to show this picture. This is the kitchen that you
Yes, yes, yes,
and how
yes.
it's busy and vibrant
And cluttered, right?
and cluttered. So was it
Yes.
the clutter that you tried to capture when
Yes.
to
I
communicate
wanted to
busyness and vibrance?
yes, I wanted to show that it was alive. It was There was a hive of activity. People congregate where they eat.
Yeah.
Food is universal, even more so for Chinese. And this photo perfectly illustrates the social gathering and how food takes a huge part of their lives in there. And this kitchen is big when you think about it. It's really, really big, and that means they serve a lot of people. I wanted to convey that in the photo. So there you go.
Thank you so much. I think we are running out of time, but I also picked up a few other points from what you were saying about having a sense of a place is inborn and it's innate. So do you think that this sense can be nurtured, or are you just born with it or not?
Oh, you can nurture it. You can nurture it. When I was young, I don't know anything about this. It's just that over the years, as I grew up, I observed the world around me. It sort of grew. Yes, you can nurture it, and you can also pass it on. Another thing, and it's important. You can pass it on to the next generation. You can tell them stories. It's just like with my grandmother. When you sit around my grandmother, she tells me stories of their life before they came to the Philippines. You grew up with that, and you start create. You have this seed that's planted in you that continues to grow as you move on.
My last question, Chester, is being a photographer, you probably would be biased, but more words or more photos?
I would like to say more photos, because a photo is more than 1,000 words. A single photograph is more than 1,000 words. But I'll put an exception to that. Words are important because they work together. You can have a beautiful photo of a kitchen, but you wouldn't know what it is unless somebody can write a very good caption on it. So yes, photos important. Ron even will say that. Ron Knapp will say, Chester can take these amazing photos that tells you a lot of things. Yes, but I will always say, I would add, but Ron's words and explanation complements it. You need both. But you can argue about how many percentage of photos versus words. That's besides the point. I would say they both work together.
You could always say pictures bring words to life, words bring pictures to life.
Well, let me illustrate this to you in a very simple way. A photograph on a page occupies a bigger space than a caption. Right? If you look at the book, how big is the space occupied by the photo? How big is the space occupied by the caption? I mean, that's how I see it. But many people dispute that. But that's how it is. Yeah.
Okay, so with that, we should wrap up this session. I've taken up so much of your time. For anyone who wants to check out beautiful photos on Chester's website, it's www.borg-space.com. C-O-M.
Yes.
So
Yes.
that's another session in entirety on what Borg space means. And with this, end this session. Thank you so much, Chester, for your time.